The night falls, O Partha, and they are helplessly dissolved. Text 20. Parastasmatu bhavonyo vyakto vyakta sanatanaha yassa sarveshu bhuteshu nashatsu na vinashyati. Yet there is another nature which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and it is never annihilated. While all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. Text 21. Avyakto kshara ityuktas tam ahu paramangatim yang prapya na nivartante tadhama paramang mama. That supreme abode is called unmanifested and infallible, and it is the supreme destination. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. Text 22. Purusha sarvapara partha bhaktya labhyastvananyaya yasyanta stani bhutani yena sarvang idam tatam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. Amazing. Text 23. Yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyatayanti tam kalang vakshami bharatarshabha. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which passing away from this world, one does or does not come back. Text 24. Agnir jyotiraha shukla shangmasa utarayanam tatra prayatta kachanti brahma brahma vidojana. Those who know the Supreme Brahman pass away from the world during the influence of the fiery god, in the light, at an auspicious moment, during the fortnight of the moon, and the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Text 25. Dhumo ratristhata Krishna shangmasa dakshinayanam tatra chandram samjyotir yogi prapya nivartate. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the moonlight, fortnight, or in the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, or who reaches the moon planet, again comes back. Text 26. Shukla Krishne gati hyete jagatas shasvate mate ekaya yatyana vrittim anyaya vartate punaha. According to the Vedas, there are 2 ways of passing from this world, one in light and one in darkness. When one passes in the light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. Text 27. Naite sriti partha janan yogi muyati kaschana tasma sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjana. The devotees who know these 2 paths, O Arjuna, are never bewildered. Therefore be always fixed in devotion. Text 28. Vedheshu yageshu tapashu chaiva dhaneshu yat punya phalang pradishtang atyeti tam sarvang idam vitvitva yogi param stanu paiti chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. At the end, he reaches a supreme abode. And then we read the last text will be for today, text 1 of chapter 9. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha idam tu te guhyattamam pravakshamya nasuyave jnanam vijnana sahitam yagyatva mokshase shubhat. The Supreme Lord said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most secret wisdom. knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Back to text 19. Again and again the day comes, and this host of beings is active, and again the night falls, all part, and they are helplessly dissolved. So here, Krishna is continuing to summarize the nature of this material world, which, beginning with, anyone remembers, with text 15 actually, where Krishna describes this world as two things. What are the two things? Dukhalayam and
Ashashvatam.
Ashashvatam. What does Dukhalayam means? Dukha, meaning full. Alayam means a place. Dukha, place full of miseries. Ashashvatam, temporary. Okay, so this material world is miserable and is temporary. And even if you figure out a way to decrease the misery, anyways, you got to get out. It's temporary. So, and then he gives examples how this world is temporary. He says, what, in the next verse? Even from the highest planet in this material world, there is what? Death and birth, repeated birth and death. But in contrast, in the material world, in the spiritual world, there is no birth. And then he shows that this world, one day of Brahma is 1,000 yuga cycles, which is a long time, right? But in the midst of eternity, it seems like a flash. Actually, 1,000 ages. How many years is that? It's like 4,320,000 years? We know one cycle lasts about 4 million, right? 4,320 years, 20,000 years. That times 1,000 would be about 1 billion. That's one day of Lord Brahma. And the duration of his night is just as long. But still, at the end, it's all annihilated. Even but when Brahma's day starts again, all the living entities, they come into being, and when they arrive, they're all destroyed. And so Krishna is saying in this verse, again and again, the day comes, and everyone begins their activities again. And night comes, they all end their activities. And they're helplessly, this is happening against our will. We're being forced to take birth and forced to die. It's not a choice when you're a conditioned soul. You can say, I have my free will. No, not in this world. You're limited how much freedom you have. You already misused your free will, so now you don't get full access to it. You can't decide to not take birth again. So we have to remember this. This is important because some people think they apply this same experience that we have in this world. We have very little freedom of choice. It's imposed upon us. And that's the material energy. Whatever is imposed upon us against our will, know it to be Krishna's illusory energy. We don't have a choice in this material world. So let's go to the next verse. Yet Krishna says, Parastasmat bhavonyo vyakto vyakta sanatanaha. There's another place, another nature, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. Right? It's transcendental, meaning the laws that operate here don't apply there. There, it's freedom. There, living entities choose to serve Krishna. And the reason they come from there over here is a choice. Even those who are envious of Krishna, it is a choice. It's an act of the will. Versus here, everything is by force. We're pushed by the ultimate energy. Prakrite, was it? Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. We're pushed by the illusory energy in so many facets. And this applies in so many regards. But in the spiritual world, it's not like that. Everything is impelled by the living entities' free will and arranged by the internal potency of the Lord. They voluntarily surrender to Krishna's transcendental desires, and it's a choice. We're forced to birth and die. So when all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. So I'll read the purport and then I'll read the next line, because I'm tying in this point that I'm trying to make. Krishna's superior spiritual energy is transcendental and is eternal. It is beyond all the changes of material nature, which is manifest and annihilated during the days and nights of Brahma. Krishna's superior energy is completely opposite in quality to material nature. Superior and inferior nature are explained in the 7th chapter. Anyone knows what Prabhupada is talking about? What verse? What's the material nature? Bhumir apanala vayuhu kamana buddhi evacha ahankara itiyame bhina pakrati ashtada. And the next verse? Prakrite vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho jayatam jarate jagat. So, two energies are explained, superior and inferior nature, in the 7th chapter. Material nature is being exploited by the living entity. It's kind of a conundrum, because material energy also is a personality, Maya, the illusory energy. She has some influence over us, and she influences us to exploit this material world. Because material world also matter. It's dead, has no consciousness, cannot act or move on its own. But the superior energy, how does she do this? It's said in the 7th chapter as well. What is the verse? Daivihi shagunamai mamamaya duratyaya mamivaye prapadyante mayametam dramtite. Krishna says this divine energy of mine. So she's empowered by Krishna. That's how she can do. And move us according to our desires. Ultimately, whatever Maya is pushing us to is because at some point we may have desired it, actually. You may think but we desired it at some point. And Krishna and Maya is just saying, okay, now you can do. Go chase after this. So that supreme abode is called unmanifested and infallible. Can never be destroyed. It's always manifested. And it is the supreme destination. I mean, there's nothing else beyond this. There's no light or Brahman after this. That's just the effulgence of the spiritual planets, or the effulgence of Krishna. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. Some people think, oh, he never comes back. Well, this is in contrast to what? To the previous verses, where everyone is what? Forced to come back. So in that context, to make that distinction between this world and that world, and there nobody comes back means no one is forced to come back. There's no material influence there. There's no Maya pushing you. It's not that some Maya is going to overwhelm you in the spiritual world like some foolish people think, and you're going to come back. If you come back, it is due to your misuse of your free will. You chose to be envious of God. Krishna Bahimuk Bhogavanchakara Nikatasta Maya Dhyakare. The moment the living entity decides to turn his back away from Krishna, or even just desires it a little bit, a curiosity, as His Holiness Dhanavir Goswami Maharaj writes in one of his magazines, curiosity killed the cat, right? He was a little curious about perhaps serving Krishna in this world. Therefore he becomes who? Lord Brahma. Oh, not so bad, right? You don't fall into gross sense gratification from the spiritual world. Generally, it's Lord Brahma. It's the highest position in the whole universe. And still you're aware of Krishna, but you're curious about being separate or enjoying Krishna or controlling the material world. And it is a choice. Nothing influenced you. It wasn't that something overcame you. Maya is not in the spiritual world. It is an act of the will. You decided to turn your back away from Krishna. Oh, what a heavy statement for most people. You mean it's my fault? Yeah, it's not that someone ate an apple and you're reaping the consequences of that. No, you had something to do with it. So it's foolishness. Then we have no hope of developing love for Krishna if it's not our fault, if we have no choice in the matter. No, we can endeavor. Bhakti yoga is a cultivation. Srila Prabhupada writes. It's always, your will is involved in it. That's what it means, a cultivation. You have to actually want to love Krishna and develop love for Krishna, and he bestows that gift to you because you want. It's already there. He bestows me, he just removes the covering. He allows you to experience that love which is already there for Krishna. So it's a simple thing, but here it's in the Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes people want to argue for ages, even start a whole movement based on these basic points that are described right here in the Bhagavad Gita. The supreme abode of the personality of Godhead Krishna is described in the Brahma Samhita as Chintamani Dham, a place where all desires are fulfilled. Well, that's nice. What is it? Your mundane desires? Whose desires is everyone's desires in the spiritual world? What is everyone desiring? To serve Krishna. Okay. How do we word this in the same kind of flow that I'm going with? Everyone is full of Krishna's desires. In the spiritual world, they're all full of Krishna's desires. There's a big difference. So when they fulfill their desires, it's not their desires, it's Krishna's desires. But they have made it theirs. Just like we say, we want to make the desire of the spiritual master our own. Right? Of course, new devotees, they want to make their desires their spiritual master desires. I have this desire, can you make it yours and give me your blessings? But this is foolishness. Of course, so we should grow up in the spiritual life and make the desire of Krishna or the spiritual master of our authorities our desire and make it one with our heart. And that should be our poison that keeps us up day and night, how to fulfill their desires and dreams. And ultimately, their desires is the ultimate welfare of every living entity. Just Krishna makes that point clear. He's the well-wisher of every living entity. Suridam sarvabhutanam. There's no one who loves like Krishna loves. So if we get a little fraction of that, then we can begin to love other people and actually connect them to Krishna. This is the supreme abode. This is what happens there. And we can invoke that by our transcendental consciousness and understanding in this world. But we have to have a clear understanding of all these subtle things, as was just mentioned. So the supreme abode of Lord Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, is full of palaces made of tunstone. There are also trees which are called desire trees that supply any type of eatable upon demand. And there are cows known as Surbharbi cows, which supply a limitless supply of milk. See, when a devotee hears this, he becomes so inspired. When a karmi hears this, he becomes also inspired, but for a different reason. He's thinking, wow, I'm going to ask this desire tree to give me what I want. They think that's what the spiritual world is like. You go there and Krishna fulfills all your selfish desires. But they don't know that devotees want what Krishna wants. So even if it seems like they're saying, Krishna, I want this, it's because Krishna wants it. It's like we hear the cowboys asking Krishna, we want to go to this Talavan forest and try this beautiful fruit. They know that's what Krishna wants. So they only desire what Krishna desires. So the devotee becomes inspired because he says, wow, so much opportunity to do service for Krishna without any inebrities. The opulence of the spiritual world inspires a devotee completely different. Therefore, Krishna can sometimes bestow a lot of opulence to the devotee because he knows that he will simply use it for my service. He won't hurt him. He won't harm himself, right? Why would the father give something to a child if the child will harm himself with it? Right? No, I give him unlimited opulence. He will not harm himself. But if it's harmful for your devotional service, Krishna will take it away if you're very fortunate. If not, he will let you cut yourself a little or hurt yourself with your own foolishness. That's another way of learning. It's indirect learning. Intelligent way, one learns directly by hearing. But most of us are foolish. So we may not be so fortunate. Krishna may sometimes let us play out our foolishness, and then he yanks everything away to give us a chance to realize how foolish we are. He does that with the demons in extraordinary ways. With the devotee, he does that a little bit. With the demons, he also does that. Just like Hiranyaksha, when he was fighting with Lord Varaha, he used his maximum strength and maximum effort and maximum weapons so that he can exhaust his foolishness and realize, by my own strength, it's incomparable to God. And then he gets killed. He could have just killed him immediately, but Krishna sometimes waits. Similarly, he sometimes waits for the devotee to smash us into pieces so that we can become humbled. So let's keep reading the purport. In this abode, the Lord is served by hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune, Lakshmis, and he is called Govinda, the primeval Lord and the cause of all causes. The Lord is accustomed. Prabhupada is literally just translating from verses. He's not like, this is straight from the Brahma Samhita, which is nice. And then the next verse is also from the Brahma Samhita. He said, the Lord is accustomed to blow his flute. Venum Kwanandantam. His transcendental form is the most attractive in all the world. His eyes are like the lotus petals, and the color of his body is like clouds. He is so attractive that his beauty excels that of thousands of cupids. Wow. He wears saffron cloth, a garland around his neck, and a peacock feather in his hair. In the Gita, Lord Krishna gives only a small hint of his personal abode. This is a small hint, actually. We can see in this verse, he's just saying that it's eternal, it's infallible, it's unmanifested. Of course, we unpack this a little bit because the principles is that it functions under a different principle that this material world functions. There's no envy, there's no hate, there's no greed. It's not limited. There's no inebrities, as Prabhupada writes. That's the principle that this is illustrating by showing that it's unmanifested and infallible. There's no inebrities, in other words. So we can see all the inebrities that we experience in this world, they don't exist in the spiritual world. So that's how you unpack this. You start seeing, okay, what other inebrities do I experience in this world? There's lust, anger, greed. None of that exists. The limitations of the mind, limitations of the body. So then we say, wow, the spiritual must be very nice. Or else this verse doesn't really make much sense. I mean, it's just like, okay, it's a place that's just eternal. How is that attractive? I mean, but when you know the principle behind there, then you can see, oh, okay, there's no inebrities in the spiritual world. There's nothing, no one's dependent like on here. There's dependent under the laws of material world. Everyone's fully under the control of material nature. But here, everything in the spiritual world, everyone is acting on the platform of full freedom. Because who gets full freedom in this world? We have experience of this also. Those who can be trusted with that freedom, right? The more someone trusts you, the more freedom they give you. The more they don't trust you, they restrict you. They say, no, you can't do this. We don't trust you. That's really what it boils down to. But if you're trusted, you get more freedom. The government won't put you in jail if they trust you. If you commit crime, you lose the trust of society. Society says, no, put him behind bars. This guy is a murderer or a molester or a thief. You lost trust. So in the spiritual world, everyone has unlimited trust. Why? Because they're so busy trying to satisfy Krishna's desires. And he has unlimited desires. So there's unlimited opportunity to be fully satisfied to serve Krishna. So there's no need of inebrities. They're not forced at all to be in the spiritual world. They do it out of their voluntary will, out of love for Krishna. A vivid description is given in the Brahma Samhita. Vedic literature states that there is nothing superior to the abode of the Supreme Godhead, And that abode is the ultimate destination. When one attains to it, he never returns to the material world. Krishna's supreme abode and Krishna himself are non-different, being the same quality. On this earth, Vrindavan, 90 miles southeast of Delhi, is a replica of that supreme Goloka Vrindavan located in the spiritual sky. When Krishna descended on this earth, he sported in that particular tract of land known as Vrindavan in the district of Mathura, India. So the whole spiritual world has this quality of Sat Chit Ananda. And these are good to try to meditate on and understand. Chaitanya Charitamrita elaborates on these different potencies. But everything in the spiritual world is living, is conscious. There's no dullness. Here, only certain things are alive. And even those things that are alive, they're more or less like walking dead because there's no Krishna in most people's lives. Therefore, they're living a ghostly life, simply going through the motions, and time will simply take away all their foolish plans. But when we come to Krishna consciousness, we're immediately situated on the eternal platform. Our real life begins. And then we can have real relationships on that platform based on going back home, back to Godhead. And that's exciting. Based on not suffering the threefold miseries, not having these inebrities that we experience in this world. Not being limited in any regards. In the spiritual world, there's no limit to how much enjoyment there is. Real Ananda means no limit. There's Anandamayo Bhyasa. It's ever increasing happiness. Versus here, it's like everything is downhill. It's like there's a limit of the so-called happiness we experience. But in the spiritual world, we only have more to look forward to. But for every relationship that's based on the spiritual planet, there's only more to look forward to, actually. So that's exciting. Versus, if you think of material life, it's like, oh man, that sounds terrible. It's all downhill from there. It's like, right, the best part of your relationship in the material world, the best moments, after that, it's all downhill. It's like the parents, when their child leaves, they're completely frustrated because they're like, all the good times are gone. And in Kali Yuga, nobody cares for their parents so much as in previous ages when people lived in close family quarters. Now everybody lives separately, all over the world or all over the place. Barely have time to check on each other or talk to each other. The relationship becomes dried up over time. There's no spiritual dimension to it. It's all eventually going to end. Krishna, we already read this. So Prabhupada makes the point that this Goloka Vrindavan that's located here is actually a dham. Dham is nine different from the spiritual world, actually. And Krishna can do this because he has full control over his energies. Even this material energy, which is his separated energy, still he retains control of it indirectly. But at any moment he can change matter into spirit, spirit into matter, like this. So this Goloka Vrindavan, when it becomes manifested, once in a day of Lord Brahma, Krishna comes and manifests this Goloka Vrindavan. And we can take care of it. We can take advantage of it. But it's eternal. It's not destroyed when this material world is destroyed. So Prabhupada, the reason he brings that up is because even the spiritual world which is manifested here is also not annihilated when this temporary world is annihilated. They stay here. It doesn't apply to even those holy dhams which we can enter into in this world. This principle also applies there. We don't have to necessarily, it's not go beyond this universe, but even the dham which is manifested here, this same principle applies. That's why Prabhupada is bringing it up in the purport. Okay, text 222. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. Purport. It is clearly stated that the supreme destination from which there is no return is the abode of Krishna, the Supreme Person. The Brahma Samhita describes the Supreme Abode as Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. This is nice. A place where everything is full of spiritual bliss. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. This word has so much meaning. And Prabhupada is going to elaborate, watch. Whatever variegated is manifested there is all of the quality of spiritual bliss. There is nothing material. All variegatedness is expanded as the spiritual expansion of the Supreme Godhead Himself. For the manifestation there is totally of the spiritual energy, as explained in chapter 7. As far as this material world is concerned, although the Lord is always in His supreme abode, He is nonetheless all-pervading by His material energy. So by His spiritual and material energies, He is present everywhere, both in the material and the spiritual universes. Yasyantastani means that everything is sustained by Him, whether it be spiritual or material energy. It is clearly stated here that only by bhakti or devotional service can one enter into the Vaikuntha spiritual planetary system. In all the Vaikunthas, there is only one Supreme Godhead, Krishna, who has expanded Himself into millions and millions of plenary expansions. These plenary expansions are four-armed, and they preside over the innumerable spiritual planets. They are known by a variety of names: Purushottama, Trivikram, Keshava, Madhava, Aniruddha, Rishikesha, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Sridhara, Vasudeva, Damodhara, Janardhana, Narayana, Vamana, Padmanabha, etc. These plenary expansions are likened unto the leaves of a tree, and the main tree is likened to Krishna. Krishna, dwelling in Goloka Vrindavan, His supreme abode, systematically conducts all affairs of both universes, material and spiritual, without a flaw, by His power of His all-pervasiveness. So Krishna expands into everything that we see around us, both material and spiritual. It's all coming from Krishna. So in that sense, Krishna is everywhere. By his presence is everywhere. We can't escape Krishna, actually. So why not surrender to Him? If anyways we're dependent on Him, so why not directly depend on Him? And then we can truly understand Him as He is, as He desires. Because despite Krishna being everywhere and we're always in touch with Krishna, still we don't know Him because we don't want to surrender to Him. But the moment the living entity decides to actually surrender to Krishna and understand Him through service, that's when everything changes. Service is the way to understand God. And you might say, why is that? Because Krishna, service means what? To please Krishna, to please the beloved. So Krishna is only full of that. He's full of that love for His fallen conditioned souls, for every living entity, for everything that exists. So how can you understand if you don't have that? You have to have that also. Then you can understand how much He loves you. The more you develop love for Krishna, then you can understand how much He actually cares for His fallen conditioned souls, for all His living entities. He's actually, from His perspective, He's a servant of everybody, actually. He agrees to be the enjoyer, to give pleasure to His devotees. He knows that's how they enjoy. It's like the stomach is connected to the rest of the body. The rest of the body can only enjoy through the stomach. So without the stomach being the enjoyer, the rest of the body cannot enjoy. So without Krishna being the enjoyer, no one else can properly enjoy actually. Our enjoyment is dependent on his. But if we foolishly think otherwise, then we'll suffer. Just sometimes we give the example of the drop in the ocean has the potency or the qualities of the ocean, but not in full. It cannot have the full power of the ocean separate from the ocean. In the ocean, generally, if you take a drop of water, it doesn't lose its potency either. It's still very powerful ocean. It might lose its potency if you're like a scientist. You can probably measure point something. It loses of power because you took one drop away. Of course, that's why this is a gross example. Krishna doesn't lose any potency just because the jiva is separate from him. The only person who loses out is we. Krishna has unlimited Lakshmis. So many devotees, he's fully satisfied. But still, for our benefit, he expands and he wants, and he facilitates us in order to rectify us through this material energy. And he incarnates in so many forms just to turn our face towards him. And the living entities in all these planets, Prabhupada is explaining, they all have the Supreme Personality of Godhead in so many varieties of forms. And he's not alone in those planets. He has unlimited devotees also there. So every living entity can serve Krishna, and Krishna will reciprocate in so many different ways. So it's not that Krishna, sometimes we hear like this, Krishna takes on a form to fulfill the desires of the devotees. So which came form first, the desire or Krishna? Anyone knows? So how did they get the desire? Yeah, they got it from Krishna. So when we hear about, let's say, Lord Nrsingadev or whatever, like Prahlad Maharaj knew about that form, Lord Nrsingadev. So he took on that form of his devotee to fulfill that desire, but that desire, he got it from Krishna. It's not that we force Krishna to acquire a form by our desires. No, he has those forms already. And the devotees hears from the scriptures, from the devotees, and he develops a desire, and Krishna takes on or manifests that form to fulfill the desire which he already bestowed in the devotee's heart, to have Krishna in that particular form. It's not an imagination. It's not a concocted idea of form. People think all these forms of Krishna that you're seeing is made up by somebody. We're putting on our own experience and projecting it into the spiritual world. But actually, we're projecting the spiritual world into this material world. But it's imperfect. Our projection is mixed up with lust, anger, and greed, envy. So it's a perverted reflection. Now, this next couple verses, Krishna will explain the different times by which one can attain this abode, which he just described, which is so amazing, full of inebrities, where only those who have love for Krishna are there, right? He's attainable, or you can go to that abode if you have unalloyed love for Krishna. So there's no mixed love, there's no perverted love in the spiritual world. So Krishna, now that he's attracted us by explaining how we can attain this place and what this place is like, he's going to compare the other people who need to do some gymnastics or something to try to achieve this world. But the devotees, as Prabhupada explains in the purports, if you read, he's not really concerned for these other technicalities. Krishna, he knows Krishna will take care of him. Actually, Krishna makes his point in the text 27. It says, devotees who know these two paths, Arjuna, are never bewildered. Meaning they're not bewildered by these two paths, like, okay, I have to figure out which time of the day I should leave and all these things. It's just, they're not bewildered by this. They are fixed on devotional service. That is the gift. If I have that, then you're already in the spiritual world. If you get devotional service, some service for Krishna, that is, you have achieved the supreme gatim. By that is the greatest treasure, the opportunity to give Krishna everything. I was just hearing a lecture, it was ecstatic. And I was sweeping the floor and I was like, wow, so much fun sweeping the floor. It's kind of silly because you may think it's a simple task, but it's kind of inconceivable how you can have so much fun just sweeping the floor. And I was just like laughing at the whole experience because it's inconceivable how you can be satisfied in a different way by just sweeping a floor for Krishna. But Prabhupada was saying in the lecture that every service is samadhi. Actually, that's how we enter samadhi. The devotee doesn't enter samadhi like the yogis or the bogis or the jnanis. He's samadhi by getting an opportunity to some service where he can fully apply his everything to. Because when you do something, it requires some intelligence, it requires your mind, emotions, everything you invest in that activity to do it nicely, as best as you can, as efficiently as you can. You can always try to improve. And your devotee feels very satisfied. You get absorbed. If you really do it nicely, it will require everything from you. You will have to be absorbed. So, but sometimes when we're new, we can only get absorbed if the service is very difficult or we get a lot of, but sometimes you can experience that samadhi, even just sweeping the floor, just like so much you can do with this simple service. Some people are like, oh, I don't get a taste unless I get some big numbers or whatever the case may be. That's okay. But Prabhupada was explaining, even the farmer, he's also in samadhi. The sweeper, the person cleaning, that's also samadhi. He was giving all these varieties of services. That's also samadhi. So I was like, wow. The idea is that any service can really make you absorbed, apply everything, your mind, efforts, everything to that service, and you can be fully absorbed in Krishna. If you're doing it for Krishna, you think how Krishna would be very pleased with this service. And if you think like that, then you won't mess up. You won't leave a crumb on the floor unnecessarily. You won't leave your room a mess unnecessarily. You'll do it nicely for Krishna. Because, this is opportunity to get fully absorbed. This is what everybody wants. Everyone wants to experience samadhi. What does that feel like? You have an opportunity every day. Do some service. So that when I was new, I used to think my intelligence can only be purified by reading Prabhupada's books, right? Because it says, right, if you read this Bhagavad Gita, your intelligence is purified. But actually, a fast way to purify your intelligence, apply your intelligence in some service. It takes intelligence to do your service nicely. And your intelligence, because it's being used for Krishna's service, it's getting purified. It's not that it's karma yoga by doing some physical activity or doing some dishes. This is karma yoga. And now when I'm reading this is something else. No, it's if you do it right, it's bhakti yoga. It's actually, it requires everything from you. You're applying intelligence, body, mind, everything. And it all becomes purified. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada said, I hatch this plan of book distribution or, so many varieties of service. Prabhupada came up because he knew if we don't have something that fully engages all our mind intelligence, then it won't become purified. Our mind and intelligence will be used otherwise. We'll be planning for so many other things instead of how to improve our services, how to do more for Krishna, give more and take less. That should be the motto of our whole life. Just how much more can I do for Krishna? How much more can I chant for Krishna? Improve my chanting. That takes some intelligence. If you want to improve your chanting, you have to think about it and say, okay, I have to plan around my rounds, make time for it. So everything, if you want to do it nicely, will purify you completely, actually. If your intention is clear. But if it's not, then you think, only this thing will purify me, only that will purify me, only this. But as you evolve in your consciousness, you realize that actually everything is a service. Everything is for the pleasure of Krishna. Of course, when we're new, if we don't make a distinction between sadhana and service, we'll fall down because we'll say, I don't need to do any sadhana because it's all service. Or I'm too busy doing sadhana. and no service. So the distinction is there for our own benefit. But actually on the high platform, there's no distinction. It's all absolute. It's not that in the spiritual world they have to make this is sadhana, no, it's all for the pleasure of Krishna. And the soul is fully conscious in all its endeavor to please Krishna in every action. So if we're fixed in that, in devotional service, then we don't care for any of these other things because we know Krishna is satisfied. That's our experience of God. We experience God through service, through pleasing Him. We experience the spiritual world through giving pleasure to Krishna. That's what they're doing in the spiritual world. That's the highest happiness. So much higher that Krishna says, my devotee is more valuable than me because he has love for me. So he sells himself to his devotees. And how love is translated into service. So we can end there. Any quick questions or comments? Yes, Magadari Prabhu. Yeah. I'm always going over time, neglecting my service.
You made a bunch of points earlier about the living entity not being forced to serve Krishna in the spiritual world. But then later you said, there's kind of this point about it's only intelligent. It's a fact. We're servants of Krishna. So how is it not that we're not forced? Because we're going to get punished. So for an intelligent person, he's forced. Right?
It seems like it's, but it's not, because we can choose to be beat again and again in the material world. We can choose to be foolish. Krishna will let you. But that's not inside of intelligence. It's like, you're getting beat. How is that intelligent? You're not. And really, this beating, we caused it ourselves, We caused our own suffering. We are the cause of our own suffering and distress. So is it not intelligent to enjoy with Krishna? So it is foolish, actually. But he's not going to force you to be intelligent. Yes, the Damodar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So you can make this as quick as you want, but because it might be a little bit long, like an answer, explanation required. But I'm just thinking, I don't understand something, because a lot of things, but one thing on this topic between the relationship of Krishna and Maya, it would be weird if if we take the sun and then in the whole picture of the sun, there's one splotch of darkness there, inexplicable darkness. It'd be inconceivable. Because wherever there's sunlight, there can't be darkness. And we say that wherever there's Krishna, there can't be Maya. So then when we're looking at the spiritual sky, it's okay. And then there's one splotch of Maya. So how do you make sense of that? Yeah.
This is an interesting question. Well, actually, it's not that there's no... Our understanding of darkness, this is a multi-leveled question, actually, but one aspect I'll answer is our experience of darkness. So in the spiritual world, there's no darkness, right? It's not that there's no darkness. There's no darkness means there's no forgetfulness of Krishna, because there may be pastimes when there's darkness, but still, it's full of light, meaning it's full of remembrance of Krishna. So that's one perspective. So our experience, when we read that, we think in a mundane way. We say that where there's Krishna, there's no darkness. There's no dark like in this world. When you flash light, all darkness goes away. Yeah, that's one aspect. But actually, in the transcendental world, you can have darkness. It's not that that's a, what's it called? There's an anomaly in the spiritual world to have an area of darkness. And even in the spiritual plane, there's daytime, nighttime. For Krishna's nighttime pastimes. So it's there. And that's okay. So they shouldn't understand it in a mundane way. By the logic of this world, this analogy that's given, where there's Krishna, there's no darkness. But still, even in this world, we have some example of this. Just like there's sun in the daytime, there's places where there's shadow. There's a shadow. So sometimes the material world is considered a shadow. Dark absence of light in that area, there's a shadow. So here we have experience of shadowy places. So Maya is considered like the shadow of Krishna. She's behind the Krishna. So don't try to think of the spiritual world or the spiritual domain in terms of geographical experiences of this world either. It won't work. It may be there for explanatory purposes to give you some concept, but it doesn't actually work. If you try to understand the analogy too much, it breaks down. It starts to break down actually, because it's limited to the laws of this world. So anyway, that's a small answer for. You can answer this question in a couple ways, but we can end there. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hatenu kampam susamikshama.